Hi, my name is Philip Taylor, and over the next few moments, what I would like to do is talk with you about the beauty of purpose. And in our current culture that we live in North America, it's very difficult sometimes to find purpose because we have the big question of who am I, why am I here, and what real purpose do I have in life? It's very difficult to answer those questions from the point of view that's kind of offered to us through humanistic terminologies. And so I wondered if you'd be willing to go on a journey with me to just kind of think together about some things that would provoke this thought. And one of them comes down to this concept of creation. And not really so much creation versus evolution. That's kind of a tired approach, but really in the idea of realizing that creation is not just a religious dogma that you have to turn off all of your senses in order to come to the conclusion that we've been created by a loving creator. Because really it's all wrapped up in purpose and why we're here. And so that's kind of my question to you tonight. Is creation sound science, or is it just a bunch of noise? And I'm going to be referring to some articles that I've looked at over the last number of weeks through a course that I've been taking at Regent University. And in this course, I've been looking at and being introduced to a gentleman by the name of Hugh Ross. And he has a ministry called Reasons to Believe. And I have an article that I read in some extra study that I had done that really sparked my interest through a blog report that we needed to do. And that blog report was specifically on convergence. And so one of the areas that I was looking at that this article was written by, he wrote this, Dr. Hugh Ross wrote this article called, "Were Humans Created Special, or Did They Evolve from a Hominid?" And he wrote this article in July of 2016 on his website, Today's New Reason to Believe. And one of the first things that he did in this article is he broke down some ideas behind kind of what makes humans maybe special, because when you look at the evolutionary model, not only are they using some science to come to the conclusions that they have, they're also taking some purpose out of humanity. And that's kind of the approach that I want to take with you over these next few moments. Is, would you be willing to see from a standpoint that we all feel like at some point in our life there's a reason why we're here. Now, why would humans feel that way? Are humans special? And there's a few things that Dr. Hugh Ross points out in this article that he wrote in 2016 that really piqued my interest when I was doing some additional reading. And one of the things that he talked about was that humans understand symbolic thought or symbolic ideas, which was very curious connection that he made. Simple things like road signs, for example. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid and we'd go driving down the highway, I lived in an urban area, but as soon as you leave the city and you start driving on these country roads, maybe you've seen them too, there's these signs that have the deer symbol on them. And just like jokingly, I remember my dad saying to me, how do the deer know to cross the road right where this sign is? And that's kind of the idea behind this kind of thought that that Dr. Hugh Ross is bringing up, is that there really are no purpose behind signs for the animal kingdom. They can't reason about a sign. If they see a stop sign, they don't know what it means. If they see various colors, they don't know what those mean. And so what Dr. Hugh is saying here is he's saying, all right, we have the ability to not only think, but we have the ability to understand symbolic thought. We understand what not only road signs mean, but any kind of symbol kind of reaches out to us and communicates something. I don't know if you've ever been to a large mall for the first time and you need to use the restroom. Well, what do? You look for that sign that has a picture of the male and the female standing, and we all know cross-culturally, I've been to a couple of different countries, cross-culturally we know that those are the symbols for the restroom. Now, in the animal kingdom, they have no ability to understand what that symbolic thought or what that symbolic idea is. Only humans have the ability to do that. Something else is that humans have this spiritual capability. Humans have the ability to not only worship God in the context of Christianity, but there are spiritual connections that we're able to make with people. Follow me on this thought. I don't know if you've ever been to a large family reunion or family gathering. You walk into the room and there's nothing but your family all around you. There's something that kind of connects within us as human beings. Now you might say, I've heard of documentaries and stories about how elephants do that. Okay, that's true, but there are certain aspects to connection that something in the animal kingdom could never make. And that spiritual connection that we're able to make is unique to us. We're able to do it through the idea of worship. We're able to do it through the idea, for example, of respect. Respect is something that the animal kingdom doesn't have. What they do have is they understand fear of something. So smaller animals learn what's a predator, and they fear that predator and they're cautious about it, but they don't have a respect for that predator. They just know that that predator is going to bring danger. Where we have the ability to recognize gifts and abilities and strengths in someone, and that is a connection that humans have and we're able to make. Is it possible for something like that to evolve? If it is, why is it not mirrored in other places in the animal kingdom? Something else that's unique to us is our DNA. And our DNA, through various studies, they say in certain hominids, it's only like 1% different than other bipedal hominids. And that 1%, though, is a giant leap that we get from living in trees and living on the floors in a forest compared to building homes, clothing ourselves, eating with utensils, those types of things. It's amazing what that 1% does. But something that we don't often realize too is that our brains are actually more closely connected to the function and recall and things like that of the bird family. We often look at other primates and we say, well, look at how much like us they are. But when you start breaking down who we are as creatures that are living on this earth, there might be some outward similarities. But when you start looking and examining at why we think the way we do, how we recall things, how we work our way through various strategies of whether it would be a maze or problem solving. What scientists have actually discovered is with ravens, crows, and jays, the way that they problem solve and the way that their brain works is actually more closely associated to ours, and not so much with chimpanzees and orangutans and gorillas, which is curious. Why, if we are so closely related to these other creatures, why our brains don't function in those similarities. And so there's something there that's unique and special about us. Something that's unique within the animal kingdom is that we are the only ones who can tame other creatures. No other creature, for example, has a pet. Now, as soon as I say no other creature, I know that I did a little bit of searching on this. I know that, for example, horses, a lot of times if a horse is not able to adapt to a new stable, or if a horse loses, if there's another horse that dies and it becomes kind of agitated, a lot of times what somebody will do is they'll put like a goat or a pig or something in there, and that horse actually becomes more comfortable with that other thing in there, and they'll refer to that as like the horse's pet. But I think you would agree with me that that horse is not feeding that pig or feeding that goat or providing for it in any way. There's just some kind of mutual friendship there that we can't really put terminology on, but there's no way that we would be able to take the leap that that horse and that pig are somehow in a pet owner relationship like we are with our dogs or our cats, or even when it comes to being able to tame larger creatures. Humans for years, whether you are into this part of it or not, but just even being able to get other animals to do what we want to do, that's something that is unique to us and special to us. Something else that's quite different for us is that humans can create and understand technology. It comes to computers, it comes to automobiles, even writing utensils, buildings, lighting, any of those types of things. There's no other creature on earth that is able to go to that level. Now again, we might say, well, what about other animals that use tools? I'll give you an example that I know of is, I mentioned orangutans earlier, and I was watching a documentary on some science channel, and the documentary was specifically on orangutans. And we go through the whole thing of where they live and what they do, how they function socially, and all that kind of thing. And then at the very end of the documentary, there's this, the narrator says, okay, this next part is just mind-blowing and earth-shaking. This particular orangutan is able to use a tool. And they use this tool in a unique way. And the camera pans over to the orangutan. The orangutan goes over, picks up a stick. I can't remember if they got it off of the ground or if they actually broke it off of a tree. I can't remember that part. But they get this stick, and then they climb the tree, and there's like a termite hole that's in the tree. And the orangutan takes the stick and pokes the stick down into the hole and pulls it up and begins to eat the insects off of the stick. And that was the earth-shaking, unbelievable, this animal is using a tool. Now, I don't think that's the same as using a power drill or a hammer or, a circular saw or something like that. So sure, there's other animals that have been able to come up with unique ways to use things that are there, whether it would be rocks, whether it be an otter floating on its back and smashing shells or whatever might be going on. But we actually create tools that have powerful uses and purposes. We don't just pick something up off the ground and say, boy, I wonder what I could use this for. We actually create technology. We actually create things that can then even do a task for us. I don't know when was the last time that you had to wait at the end of your street for the ice truck to come along so that you could put ice in your ice box and preserve your food. There's a good chance in your home there's a refrigerator. That refrigerator was not something that we just found laying on the ground. Humans created that. They created the technology. They made it possible for that refrigerator to work. There's no other example of something that technical, that specific in the animal kingdom. We have a specific ability to create and understand technology. And that's unique to humans. There's nothing else like it. Something else that's really impressive to humans is the ability to be able to understand and create languages and grow the vocabulary. Tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of words exist in any specific language. And that is something that is unique to us. Now you can go into the animal kingdom and you can break into the discussion and say, well, animals are able to communicate with various sounds. I don't believe that over the last 10,000 years or 7,000 years, however long you feel that we've been able to document things and observe things and write them down, I don't believe that we have seen anything really change in the animal kingdom that would lead us to believe that animals of any type are growing their vocabulary and changing the way that they communicate, where we have been doing that for millennia. We have we have seen languages come and go, languages that were only spoken all the way across the world. Many of them have become extinct, and we don't even speak that way anymore. Our languages change, and the way that we communicate changes, then that's something that is extremely unique to us. That shows us that humans have the ability to grow their language, grow the way that they communicate. That is a unique ability within human beings to be able to do that. So as I was referring to you before about this concept of convergence, where I was saying that there's this idea that I came across while I was reading one of an article that was actually written by someone who works at the Reasons to Believe ministry. What they were doing is they were writing this article about this idea of convergence. Now, I need to confess that this was the first time I'd actually heard of this terminology. And so I was very curious about it and wanted to know what it was. But the idea behind convergence is that there are instances within the animal kingdom and the biological kingdom of just, plants and animals, where there are similarities within a species that occur, and that species is not related. Like those two species or a group of species are not related. I read some articles that were just kind of simply on the internet. I didn't do an exhaustive search of this concept, but I know that the evolutionary community explains that these convergence anomalies always revert back to a common ancestor. And really what happens is that this evolutionary concept has to presume a common ancestor. And the reason that they do is because that's where it all originated. Slow processes over millions and millions of years didn't just create certain aspects of what's in our universe and on our planet, but even that's how we got here. And so we all have to have a common ancestor. And one of the examples that I heard was that, for example, the dolphin. and the shark, the similarity there. And the explanation that was given is that the dolphin and the shark had a common ancestor. Then at one point, the dolphin, the animal that would eventually turn into a dolphin, left the ocean, evolved into a creature that then returned back to the ocean and reverted back to some of the things that were similar to the shark. So what was needing to take place in that process is not only the original evolutionary process to come up with the dorsal fin and the hunting instinct and all that kind of thing, but then that animal was going to leave its environment, have an entirely new evolutionary process, and then at some point in its history was going to return back to the ocean and become a dolphin, and that's why it's similar to the shark. So evolution has to presume a common ancestor at every crossroad, regardless of how difficult that scientific exchange would be. And that makes it very difficult to even grasp the concept. Where, on the other hand, with creation, it presumes intelligent designer. That means that there was an intentionality. And when we see convergence of various things, like birds being able to fly and bats being able to fly. So what happens there for a creationist is that we believe that God designed the concept and the idea of flight. It was done through the use of wings. Therefore, wings are the standard operating process that leads a creature to be able to fly. There's not anything else really that enables a creature to fly. Insects, birds, mammals, if they're going to fly, they have to have wings. There's not something else. Even when you take the step of what we call flying squirrels, which is actually a misnomer, right? Because the squirrels don't fly, they fall gracefully. And if you've ever seen a video of them, it's not even always necessarily gracefully. But even when it comes to being able to glide, there is an idea of a wing. And so what we believe as creationists is that God made a perfect design. And that perfect design is going to be mirrored in other places in creation. So to conclude this time, what I wanted to be able to share with you is even this idea of convergence with the chameleon and the sand lance. And the chameleon and the sand lance have identical eyes, they have identical eyelids, and they have an identical tongue mechanism. And these creatures are not related. There is no common ancestor for them. But once again, what would have to take place on an evolutionary model is that one of these creatures would have to have left an environment, have changes made, and then return to that environment. And then the evolutionary model would be, okay, that is the common ancestor, even after another change had taken place. But as a creationist, we believe that God found and designed a perfect way for the eye to function in these creatures and in other creatures, and he repeated that design throughout creation. I like to personally refer to it as a fingerprint. I don't think that I necessarily am coining that idea, but that's what helps me kind of understand exactly what God did, is that there is an identifier as to why these things are similar in creation. So these similarities create and demonstrate that there is a creator with a plan. And I wonder for you, if you have ever gotten to a place where you're wondering why you are where you are, and why do you exist, and is there any purpose in this life? And I would have to say that would be a difficult thought process to have if there is only an evolutionary model of we came from nothing, nobody made us, nobody cares about us, nobody ever had a plan for us. And even in some situations in our culture, if you really truly felt like you were even a mistake from your parents, if you were saying, my parents didn't even want me, my family didn't even want me, and I'm just not any good, I want you to know that our Creator does not make mistakes. You are here for a purpose, and God created you intentionally. And we see, as people who believe in the science behind a Creator, that there is purpose, and creation demonstrates a plan. Something that's very interesting about who God is that when we see things repeated throughout creation, it means that God was not limited. He didn't create certain laws and catch himself off guard and say, oh no, I have to do things this way, I'm limited. God is not limited. God has a plan. God is intentional with what he does. And God intentionally made you. God intentionally brought you into this world. Something that's very unique about God too is that he created this world, this universe that we live in, with common building blocks. It is an amazing thing to recognize that God knew exactly what would work. And when I look at it this way, for me personally, I see that God's design allows for two things to take place. The first thing is that God made it possible for us to make discoveries. That when it comes to the concept of science, you have to realize that even that is a miracle, because we have the ability to identify something, to study it, to research it, to come to a conclusion, and then form a thought process about it. That is extremely unique for us to be able to do. There's not any other creature on this earth that does that. There's instinct, there's ritual that takes place, there's hibernation, there's preparation for winter, there's all of those things. But the ability to look at something, to study it, to break it down, to come to a conclusion about it, that shows that God desired for us to discover him through his creation. And that's the second thing that we see, that when we're breaking things down this way, God truly wanted us to be able to really discover him. And that's what is amazing, is that we've always been known by God. I don't know what you believe about God and where you stand with God, but something that I would love for you to know is that God created you intentionally, and he's always known you. But what he's done is he's kind of left us breadcrumbs along the way to be able to come to a conclusion of who he is. In Romans chapter 1 and verse 20, it says it this way: ever since the creation of the world, his eternal power and divine nature, invisible though they are, have been understood and seen through the things he has made. God has always wanted you to be able to discover him. He knows you. He created you intentionally. There's never been a mistake. Instead, he's left ways for you to find him, and he would love for you to know him today. Thank you for your time.